Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Lunchtime Chats with Tlingit Haida. Again, I'm Ish, Richard Peterson, President of Tlingit Haida. Real honor to have everybody joining us today. And topic this week is our CARES Act relief funds. We wanted to have this conversation to hopefully open up and make sure that we have transparency and accountability to our tribal citizens and let folks know what it is exactly we're doing with the CARES Act. With us today, we have Teresa Belton, who's our Chief Financial Officer, Madeline Soboleff-Levy, General Counsel, Will Ware, Chief Development Officer, and Jason Wilson. He is our Tribal Emergency Operations Center Incident Commander. I want to thank each of you for being here with us. I've asked you to be here because you're all intimately involved in the CARES Act and helping us kind of navigate the CARES Act. And so I hope we'll be able to speak very candidly and openly about what it is we're doing, talking about some of the deciding factors and talk about the CARES Act, the law itself, so that we can help people better understand what it is that we've been given and the opportunity we have and some of the parameters that we have around that. I'd like each of you to go ahead and introduce yourself. So starting with Teresa. Teresa?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, President Peterson. My name is Teresa Belton. My Tlingit name is Galsint. I am a tribal citizen from Huna.
Thank you. Madeline?
Hello. Haiduai Dekina Dak Shakhedi Klayu Khatbuesak. My name is Madeline Soboleff-Levy. My Tlingit name is Shakhedi Kla, and my Haida name is Haiduai. I've been working with Tlingit and Haida as General Counsel for almost 5 years now.
Will?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, President Peterson. My English name is Will Ware. I'm the Chief Development Officer. My Tlingit name is Tlingit Dukdane Tan from the Chauchit, and glad to be here today.
Thank you, Will. Jason?
Pearson, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Wilson. My Tlingit name is Ketchkaish Bekluadi. I'm the Public Safety Manager for Tlingit Haida Central Council in charge of the Village Public Safety Officer Program. I've been doing that for about 15 years now.
Great, thank you all. I appreciate, again, all of you being here. And for those of you tuning in, you may be familiar with some of these. Every week as we have the lunchtime chats, we try to bring in kind of the experts on the topic that we're talking about. So you'll start to get to be really familiar with some of the faces here at the tribe. And of course, that's part of the intention is we want you to know who it is here. And so, you know, when you reach out or if you're getting services or you have questions, you know exactly who it is you're talking to and knowing that connection. As always with these lunchtime chats, if you're following along on Facebook Live, please share your questions. We'll try to get to all your questions live. If we don't get to them live, we will provide answers to your question on Facebook Live. Also, if you hit like, you'll be entered into a contest for door prizes every week. So we know that there are many tribal citizens that have been financially impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Some have been laid off and others have lost their jobs entirely. And we have a lot of long-standing programs in place to help. We felt like this particular topic was important to address because there's been a lot of questions and misconceptions surrounding how we are using the CARES Act relief funds. We've been extremely intentional and careful on how we are proceeding with the relief funds because we don't want to take any missteps. These missteps could lead us to having to return any of the funding. And a lot of people think we've had the funding for quite some time. We've only actually had the funding for a few weeks now. And, you know, we have until December 30th to get it spent. And we've been told that it's going to be, or the spending will be scrutinized very heavily. So we're trying to be very methodical. And I know that's been frustrating to some of the tribal citizens and feel like things are happening behind closed doors. We're here to hopefully provide those answers today. That being said, today we have our executive team and incident commander from our Tribal Emergency Operations Center with us. Again, we'll go ahead and get started and have that conversation. And please feel free to ask questions, type in your questions, and we'll do our very best to get to those. I'll start with you, Teresa. As the tribe's chief financial officer, you are responsible for recording the tribe's expenditures in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and to ensure all funds are expended under the guidance and regulations of the funding agency. There are several funding agencies and programs distributing CARES Act funding that Tlingit Haida has been eligible to apply for. Can you give us a breakdown of what funds we have received to date?
Thank you, President Peterson. I'd be glad to. To date, we've received just over $30 million in all the CARES Act funding. The majority of it came in through the Department of Treasury. In that amount was $20.8 million. The second largest distribution we received was from our BIA funding, and that is in our aid to tribal government and our welfare assistance. Those are the two large agencies that have sent us funding, but also we've gotten quite a bit of attention from the Department of Health and Human Services centered around our vulnerable populations, our elders and our children. And so we've applied for a number of grants and we've been awarded the ones you see here, the Administration on Aging, and then SAMHSA and Administration for Children and Families that deal with at-risk children or small children. And then we also just did get awarded a Center for Disease Control grant. And then our latest grant that we were awarded was the HUD grant for some homeless initiatives that we have. And then also we got the Paycheck Protection Program. We got one grant from the state of Alaska. And then we also did get some funding sources that are not associated with government. They are discretionary funding with Sealaska and Casey Family Programs. So in all total, the out of the $30.4 million that we got, $135,000 of it is not restricted. So all of these funds have terms and conditions that dictate how we can spend it.
Thanks, Teresa. Specifically, the two largest pots of funding are the BIA direct appropriation and then the CARES Act tribal government set-aside funding that is being dispersed through the Department of Treasury. Both sources of funding have different requirements of use. Can you talk in general about how these funds can and cannot be spent and perhaps give some examples?
I'd be glad to. When we got the funding, and we've gotten a lot of guidance from the Department of Treasury, and we've kind of used that as a template for all the funding that we have, although some of these programs do have very specific guidance for us. But the general rule for the Treasury Fund is there are three main criteria for how we are to spend it. The first one is that it has to be necessary and incurred due to the public health emergency. So we have to be able to justify the spending of that funding. Also, the cost cannot be accounted for in the budget most recently approved. And what that means is that if we've already had something budgeted as a normal routine government function, then we cannot divert these funds to pay for just regular routine operations. And then finally, they say that it has to be incurred during the period of March 1, 2020 to December 30th, 2020. So each one of these funding sources has a time period on which we can spend it, but this one, definitely the largest pot of money, ends the soonest. And so as a government, we don't have to ask for permission on how we designate or allocate these funding, these funds, but we do have to justify it. And so we have to really be thoughtful and critical about what we deem as necessary expenditures. With that, so some of the things that we can do with it is, it's really for unforeseen financial needs and the risks created by the public health emergency. So, as far as specific examples, one of the things that we can use it for, and one of the first things that we did was use it to make sure that all of our employees were safe in the workplace. And we are actively pursuing projects to make sure that we can adequately social distance, have PPE. A lot of employees are working from home. So that was one of the first things that we did. And there's a whole host of things that we need to, projects that we need to justify and plan for. But for the most part, they let us allocate the funds on how we determine what is necessary and what is the highest priorities. And then, there's a small list of items that are definitely not approved, but those are in the guidelines. If we've already budgeted for it, we can't use these funds for that, or we can't use these funds if they're going to be paid for with another source of funding. So if we're getting another source of funds from a different grant, we can't use CARES Act funding to pay ourselves back for those things, or replace revenue. So, it's a tough spot to be in because we have a very short timeline to plan for all this. But, with our government and our self-determination, we have some leeway to determine what is necessary for our tribe.
Great, thank you, Teresa. Maddie, turning to you, to ensure that we are in compliance in terms of current and future projects using the CARES Act relief funds, Tlingit Haida has received guidance through outside legal counsel to help us navigate the various federal departments and agency requirements. Can you talk about your role in reviewing this guidance and why we've been very intentional to make sure that we are not expending the CARES Act relief funds in a way that would be detrimental to the tribe?
Yeah, absolutely. the funds, the CARES Act was passed back in March. The federal guidance has been trickling in about how the Department of Treasury, for example, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs expects these funds to be spent. And that starts with looking at the statutory language that's in the CARES Act, but it goes on to look at the administrative guidance from each one of these different agencies. It has been a busy task to wade through those different documents, and the tribe has been really grateful to also rely on some support from outside counsel, because as you already mentioned earlier in our chat today, if funds are spent on unallowable expenses, then the tribe may be liable to reimburse those funds to the federal government. And that's of course not a position that Tlingit Haida would like to be in. These funds are both needed by our tribal citizens and our communities, and it would be really unfortunate for the tribe at some point to have to find another way to pay the federal government back. So it's been a delicate dance as the federal government has trickled out this guidance, but we've been doing our best to navigate it.
Great. So Maddie, can the guidance that we've received from the outside council and from Treasury be shared with other tribes if requested, and or has this guidance already been shared with other tribes?
The Department of Treasury guidance is publicly available and has hopefully been shared with all the different tribal governments who've also received funds, but we would be happy to be another source for circulating that information. Tlingit Haida has also shared some of the guidance it's received from different law firms with quite a few tribes. If there are any tribes who haven't received that, they would be welcome to reach out to Tlingit Haida, and we'd be happy to share.
Great. Well, as a tribe's general counsel, you've been following the litigation filed by Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation and the subsequent suits filed by other tribes. Can you provide an update to our tribal citizens on where this litigation is at currently?
Yes, absolutely. And just to be clear, it is more than the Confederated Tribes of Chehalis who've filed this lawsuit. There are several tribes in the lower 48 who've participated, and several tribes in Alaska who are also plaintiffs in this case. And as Teresa mentioned, the bulk of funds funds that Tlingit Haida received came through the CARES Act authorization, which set aside $8 billion for tribal governments. There's a definition of tribal government that relies on the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, and that definition is a bit of a lengthy one, but also references Alaska Native corporations. The Department of Treasury concluded from that Alaska Native corporations would be entitled to a share or a portion of the $8 billion set aside for quote unquote tribal governments. Chehalis and the other tribal plaintiffs have argued that that is not the case. And as you'll see on the slide here, on June 26th, a federal judge concluded that in fact, Alaska Native corporations are eligible to receive funds from the CARES Act. This part of the funds had already been distributed to tribes, and this caused the remaining funds to be trickled out. Around $500 million has been held back because the tribal plaintiffs, Chehalis and others, have appealed that judge's decision and are looking to the DC Circuit Court asking for reconsideration of that decision. So in the meantime, about $7.5 billion has been distributed to tribal governments, and approximately $500 million is being held back while this issue is now litigated on appeal. That's where things stand right now.
Great, thanks, Maddie. Jason, in terms of the CARES Act, a lot of work is going into developing the Tribal Emergency Operations Center. One of the tasks you've been assigned to as the incident commander for our Tribal Emergency Operations Center was to assess all of our buildings for implementing new safety measures. Can you talk about some of the projects the tribe is currently working on with the use of the CARES Act funds?
Absolutely. This is a daunting task to look at all our facilities and try to look at ways of mitigating the circumstances that we're in right now. One of the things that we identified was we want to continue to provide service to our clients. One of the things we found was looking at a pod or kind of this phone booth type of design where we're having a client come into our facilities, helping keep them safe as well as our staff. And I'm pretty excited about the pod. It's, like I said, it's the shape of a phone booth. If you can picture the old-fashioned phone booth, probably a little bit larger than that. It's self-containing, so a person can go in at their designated time, sit in this booth, this pod. It has it's a self-cleaning pod. It has a special air circulation in the pod, and then a touch screen to allow the client to meet with their service worker and be able to do all the things that they need to do in communications with that service worker. That's one of the things. There's many other things that we're looking at. Things as simple as the entranceway into our facilities with a no-touch door, meaning the automatic doors. These are things that we need to outfit our buildings with. It's amazing if you really think about how many times a doorknob is touched, especially when we have clients coming into our facilities, and even just workers alone. So it's amazing how many thousands and thousands of times that door is touched. So something as simple as an automatic door is very huge. Taking that step, another step further is looking at soap dispensers in our bathrooms, automatic soap dispensers, automatic faucets in the bathrooms. I don't know if people are familiar with the ability to kind of wipe your hand underneath the faucet and it turns on. Again, not touching things is the things that we're looking at right now and helping mitigate the circumstance that we're in right now. Very excited about the pods. These are not going to be cheap, but I think that once we outfit a lot of our buildings with this, it's actually going to make it easy for our clients to come in and be able to meet all over with any service worker wherever they might be.
Thanks, Jason. One of the things that we're also very committed to is being a partner to our Southeast Alaska Village tribes because we share tribal citizenry. We recently met with several tribal leaders virtually to discuss expanding our Tribal Emergency Operations Center to a regional emergency operations response system. Can you talk about the outcome of that meeting and the ways in which we are providing support to those communities with the Tlingit Haida Community Council?
President Pearson. So this was, in my opinion, very, very huge for us to have our leadership and be able to communicate with them on the needs of their community. So let me back up a real quick step. First, looking at what we had as the Tribal Emergency Operations Center was established and put in place. This is kind of the first time the TEOC has been activated for Tlingit Haida Central Council. That in itself is very large and very huge for us, allowing us to not just deal with the current emergency, but able to deal with other emergencies as they come, as they arise. Quick example of that would be, we just had an earthquake on the Aleutian chain. I think it was 2 days ago. It was 7.8, which is an extremely large earthquake. We're fortunate that no tsunami was generated from that earthquake, but our TEOC would be working with our communities in the event that something happens with something like that, like a tsunami. So going back to where we're at now, and meeting with our tribal leaders and establishing what some of the needs were in their communities. The TOC came back and we were invited to a few of our communities to offer assistance. Now, what we found was the need almost starting from scratch for preparing for emergencies in general, but also specifically in dealing with COVID-19. So one of the things we decided to and designed was kind of starting a kind of a starter package for our communities to start building upon. And one of those things is buying a Connex for each of our communities and then outfitting it with about 3 months supplies of personal protection equipment, PPE items. And that would be about 3 months supply for that community to use in the event that they need to use that equipment. But it also gets our communities to start working on building that. So we're looking at outfitting now with I think it's a 3-day supply of food. Now that might sound silly thinking with a subsistence, but we've also come to rely on certain items for shopping, rice and other items that we like with our meals. So we are looking at masks, hand sanitizers, gloves, thermometers, Again, going back to the food, we're looking at other things that might not be thought of right now, but might be needed eventually with water filtration. These are all important things in dealing with an emergency. And again, we're looking at Tlingit Haida. We've been working with those communities that have been asked, are asking Tlingit Haida to assist them, not just in Southeast, but over with Anchorage, Seattle, and San Francisco. And we're looking at these starter packages. It's been a daunting task to find the PPE items, as the rest of the world was also looking for masks and gloves and hand sanitizer. We've been able to buy in bulk, which allows us to get in and find some vendors that will sell to us. Very exciting times for us right now with this equipment, and we're open to coming to any of our communities to help assist with this if invited. Thank you.
Well, that was a mouthful there, Jason. So
Yes, sir.
I want to go back on a couple of things that you mentioned. Just for everybody who doesn't know what the term Connex is, what is a Connex?
I apologize, sir. So a Connex, basically, it's a metal container, a large container. It's about, I think we're looking at 20 feet by 6 feet. And then we're going to outfit that container with some devices to help make sure that our stuff stays dry and we don't deal with mold and whatnot. So this is a storage container that allows us to put our PPE items, the personal protective equipment, inside that and start storing and building up a supply for our communities to deal with emergencies as they arise.
One of the things that you touched on too, and it's a real frustrating item for most of our citizens. It's frustrating for us, is our tribal citizens not being served if they live outside of what we call our service area. And I was really pleased that you brought up and mentioned we've included Seattle, San Francisco, and Anchorage in this, so their community councils will also be receiving these large Connex barge containers with equipment. We're working hard to not be able to use service area as a reason not to serve our people. The frustrating thing is those aren't our mandates. Those are when we have to say service area to our citizens, it's because of the funding source mandates, not ours. So this is a way where we're really excited to be able to help and start working with our citizens outside of service area. So, so I really appreciate that you mentioned that, Jason, and I know that's a passion for you as well.
Absolutely, sir.
A question for everybody is, another area we've identified for providing support is to Airlift Northwest. Can you share information on why Tlingit Haida has allocated funds to this entity? And I don't know who wants to tackle that one.
Jason, this is Jason. I don't mind answering a little bit of that, and everybody else can tag team off of me, but this is a life support for all our communities. They service all our communities. In the event of emergency or event of someone being sick and needing to be airlifted to a main hub, a larger hospital to deal with whatever ailments they're dealing with, this allows us and allows our community members to have that kind of safety net rather than waiting or potentially not having service from the local airlines.
President Peterson?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and another thing to understand about this, the support from the tribe to this entity, is that their Airlift Northwest, unlike some of the other medevac companies that service Southeast, Airlift Northwest is a nonprofit entity. They have, like all the other companies, been impacted by COVID, with a lot of people seeking medical care at a decreased rate. But they were unable to access some of the other funding sources for-profit entities. So this, and as you just mentioned, this is a way of Tlingit Haida really wanting to support vital medical services for the whole region here. and they have some particular capabilities to service people who are either COVID positive or potentially COVID positive, to safely protect the crews and still be able and willing to transport, which is really important right now.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been an exciting one for me. Growing up on Prince of Wales, I'm very familiar with the having to have people be airlifted out and medevaced, and so we don't want to lose or have that service reduced at all. And so this has been pretty exciting to help maintain that level of service. And I know that I was involved in a regional meeting here where the CBJ said they were going to follow suit with the donation because Tlingit Haida did that. And I think that's really great for our entire region. So, Will, I'll turn to you now. As the Chief Development Officer, what is your role in the development of projects using the CARES Act funding?
Well, thank you for that question. That's an interesting question. And once the executive team works with our managers across our departments, and we identify priorities of what it is and a direction we want to go and the projects we want to develop, then it falls into my office to follow through with development of those projects. For example, we're looking at a variety of different acquisitions that will meet the needs of our CARES Act funding expenditures. And we're looking at transitional housing locations and some construction opportunities, as well as just renovations to a variety of different office spaces that Jason has touched on as well.
Great. Will, part of your duties is you oversee the economic development arm of the tribe. Many people are now familiar with like Smokehouse Catering, Sacred Ground, Sacred Shine, our upcoming Southeast General Contractors. So under your department, just yesterday, we announced the small business grant application. And this is for tribal citizens that are business owners and have been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. So can you provide an overview of the eligibility requirements and grant application process?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very, like you mentioned, a very recent development, a recent project that we just went public with late yesterday. Very excited about this. This is for tribally enrolled citizens that are also U.S. citizens. Again, you can see on this PowerPoint, they must at least be a 50% owner of that small business and have no more than 50 employees or less. And really, if you've not taken a look at this application and you do own a business, you have a business license, if you take a look at this application, we tried to make it as easy as we could for our tribal citizens to go ahead and apply for this funding. It is up to $5,000, and again, we last night started receiving applications within minutes of getting these applications. You look at this application and you do own a business, you have a business license. If you take a look at this application, we tried to make it as easy as we could for our tribal citizens to go ahead and apply for this funding. It is up to $5,000, and again, we last night started receiving applications within minutes of getting these applications. You look at this application and you do own a business, you have a
Did you freeze up?
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Well, they got that 2 or 3 different times, so hopefully that was clear now.
One of the things that I want to say, and I think it's important for our tribal citizens to know, that outside of the CARES Act, we have several long-standing programs and services that are available to provide financial relief to tribal citizens and any Alaska Native or American Indian that resides in our service area. Our TANF program, our general assistance and childcare programs are crucial to our tribal citizens right now and are the essential programs we have in place to help our tribal citizens and families through the coronavirus pandemic. We've made some improvements to streamline the application process so that there are little to no delays to getting our tribal citizens the assistance they need. Depending on the funding agency, they've also been able to increase the level of financial assistance temporarily for clients and have waived some of the case management requirements outlined in the client's individual self-sufficiency plan. Again, I know this is frustrating for those that don't live in our service area. And again, I don't want to feel like I'm passing the buck when I say this. This is the truth. These are mandated by the funding agencies, and they're the ones who decide the service area requirement. I can tell you we're working extremely hard to enjoy our own economic sovereignty, to bring in unencumbered funds so that we can serve our tribal citizens no matter where they live and not be dictated to basically by funding agencies, and to fully enjoy and exercise our sovereignty to serve our citizens as we see fit. So just really want to put that out there. Will, one of the particular project that we've been pursuing with the use of the CARES Act fund is to create housing for formerly incarcerated individuals who are at high risk of becoming homeless. Can you talk about why this is an important area of focus for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially during this time, we're really having an opportunity to meet this need that you've already identified here, and so it's an exciting time where we now have the resources to go out and to look and to negotiate with some property owners and some buildings and with construction companies, and even utilize our own construction company, Southeast General Contractors, to create some housing that alleviates some of the homeless issues that we have in our community. And certainly with folks that are coming out of correctional facilities, oftentimes have difficult times finding adequate housing and as such even employment. And so the recidivism rate is relatively high. So by having an opportunity for us to utilize this funding to create, construct, renovate some additional housing needs where there's a shortage here is an exciting time.
Great, thank you, Will. We've collectively worked to get where we are at in terms of developing projects based on priority. What are some future projects that we haven't talked about that will support our tribal citizens? Rand, you want to change the slide? Oh, I thought we had future projects on there. Sorry. I don't know if anybody wants to tackle. I know Will, Teresa, and Maddie have been instrumental in those and deciding what those are. Even talking about being able to expand our delivery for vocational. So our distance education program efforts. Teresa, do you want to talk about that? You're muted.
Sorry, I seem to have lost my mouse, so I'm trying to touchpad my way through this. Yes, we recently got a non-competitive grant notice for economic development that we applied for, and we're just waiting to hear back. And they had 4 different scopes of work, and one of them was to identify a project that we could implement to help. It had to be economic recovery response, and also be tied to the COVID. So one of the things that we thought about doing, and we got a proposal from one of our managers, was um, to outfit the VTRC, which is traditionally a in-person, in-classroom type of delivery of education, vocational training, to distance. And so with that project comes a lot of equipment that we'd have to purchase. And so we've budgeted all that out. And although it's a little bit more than this grant, you know, everything that we can get together helps. And identifying projects where we can actually find resources that'll help us pay for those things, and also, you know, provide for future economic development or getting people back to work is always a good thing for us to tie those two together.
Sure. You know, one particular question that we're receiving frequently is if and when Tlingit Haida will be distributing stimulus payment or per capita distributions to tribal citizens. One of our intents for today's lunchtime chat was to address this question very specifically. As we've outlined in our conversation, there are very strict guidelines on how the CARES Act relief funding received by tribes can be used, and the CARES Act specifically prohibits the use of the funds for per capita distributions to tribal citizens. Dispersing a broad blanket of funds to tribal citizens without proof of need is not intended use of the funds. You know, I know that's one we're going to take the biggest hit on from tribal citizens, and trust me when I say I feel you and I get that, but it's very specific in there. And I've been asked very directly, and it's like, well, why are other tribes doing it, and why is Tlingit Haida the only one not? You know, we're all sovereign, and I'm not going to question or criticize or any other tribe's use of funding. I do know, and I have talked to other tribal leaders. I think one of the things that's getting confused is that many tribes are in a position to offer aid to their citizens, and they're not actually using CARES Act funds to do it, even though their intent is similar and their intent is driven by the hardships created by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, you know, very, very directly, that's where we're at with that. We will not be doing per capita distributions, and it's very directly outlined in the CARES Act not to do that. So, you know, and I'll take those questions, and I know our citizens are concerned and will continually ask, and I respect that. I respect our citizens and the need of our citizens. And so all I can tell you is we're working in very strict confines of this act. We're working diligently to come up with program and expenditures that we feel are defensible by those guidelines. And we're under an extremely tight deadline to do that of December 30th. So, but, you know, feel free. Many people do message me, email me, and you know, I'm very much happy to have those conversations. That really concludes our discussion topic. And so before I turn over for questions from the public, I just want to remind you again, like this and you'll get entered in for a door prize. And also we're going to do our best to get to the questions. I'm sure there's been quite a few questions on this topic. If we don't get to your question live, we will get to the question. So, but I thank you all very much, and I'll go ahead and turn over to Sam for questions.
Thank you, President Peterson. Thank you all. Our first question that we have today is from Christina Marie Shorey. She's asking, can all members be a part that are not just in the villages? We are members and I have 5 children. We live in Rainier, Oregon, and we have nowhere to get to go for this kind of help.
So Unfortunately, this is, I think I just answered this one. Really, if it's a disbursement, we're unfortunately not allowed to do disbursements. If there's other specific help outside of that, maybe she can share that with us.
Thank you. The next one also may have already been answered, but it's from Donna Louth. And it's just, can you help the tribe financially?
Well, I'm not quite certain what that means. When she says the tribe, does she mean ourselves, or I'm not sure. If she means tribal citizens, can we help tribal citizens financially? Probably not directly. As I said, we can't do per capita distributions. But unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where she lives, if she's in the service area, we do have programs that can serve. So.
Okay. Next question is from Sarah Gregory. How can an elder get assistance to help her pay rent? She receives SSI, APA, but her rent is over what she receives monthly. She has nowhere else to turn for help. We've called TNH 477 because it's not COVID related. She can't get any help from anyone and is about to be kicked out. She's handicapped and in a wheelchair. Who could she talk to seek help or advice?
I would think she could probably call our 477 department and ask for William Martin, our 477 director, and he might be able to navigate her beyond what anybody else has. I see Maddie has a comment.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add that the through the Tribal Family Youth Services Department, TFYS is also able to provide support to, their focus is victimized elders who've been victims of crime or other financial abuses, but they may be able to be a resource for just helping navigate what support services are out there for our elder population. So that may be another place to reach out to.
Teresa?
Yeah, and along with that, probably provide some resources to help her get into a situation with rent she can afford. But also we do have an elderly emergency assistance program, which is also run by our elders department in TFYS, the Tribal Family Youth Services. So she should probably contact them, and that would probably be the best way to start getting her situation resolved.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Our next question is from Clarence Peel. I know this COVID thing's been a monster in our lives and starting to change the direction that we never thought we'd go in. The question is, in the CARES Act, is there any way that this money could help in years after this? And some be used for helping or a wellness center, inpatient, outpatient, alcohol, drug treatment. This epidemic has been in our villages for over the last 100 years, and it still will be after this COVID epidemic is done.
Well, thanks for that, Clarence. Kind of a multifaceted question. So we have until December 30th to expend the funds, but things that we build or buy can go beyond the date. And so there's that. But to answer your question about like the wellness center, Teresa spoke about this in her opening comments. I don't believe we can, unless it's, it would be really difficult to say that these are COVID related or tied to COVID, caused by COVID. The argument may be beyond this that it has been, but I can say though, Tlingit Haida Search, Tlingit Haida Regional Housing Authority, and NC Alaska have been meeting together. The issue of treatment centers is very important and a priority, and we're looking at finding ways to build a couple of treatment centers in Southeast Alaska. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on clearances or has anything to add. Maddie or Teresa, maybe.
President Peterson, I guess I can answer a little bit more to that as well. Many of the things that we're acquiring can be and will be used well after the COVID pandemic is done. The transitional housing units that we're looking at and trying to acquire some properties for that we're negotiating on, those things will be able to be used well after this COVID pandemic is over, while we are also making sure that renovations to those transitional housings and renovations to our own offices, like what Jason was talking about a little bit ago, are focused on this COVID pandemic to get us through our immediate danger and emergency. Many of the things that we're putting into place are going to have long-lasting benefits far after this pandemic is over. And we're cognizant of those kinds of acquisitions. We're planning for those kind of long-term acquisitions so that the things that we are acquiring aren't solely just for the COVID. There are some things that, of course, that we're acquiring and purchasing that are directly and only related to COVID pandemic, but certainly a lot of the things that we're doing where there is some leeway and flexibility, we are trying to make those acquisitions and purchases that are wise and the best use of the resources that we have that will be lasting us for quite a while.
Awesome. Our next question, I'm sorry if I messed the name up, from Gail Young Dabaluz. Under the BIA aid to tribal government funds received, can local TNH chapters receive funding to help us organize? There may be chapters who have not met since the COVID mandates have been in place, and we need to prepare for the October Tribal Assembly.
Maybe Teresa might add on to this a little bit. I'm struggling myself to understand what that need would be. So if you're a community council and you're going to be preparing for tribal assembly, we've sent out emails to our delegates that we will be providing, I believe, Chromebooks to all of our delegates. And so once we do that, we'll begin swearing in those delegates. And so there's nothing preventing the council's meeting now, other than, you know, if they obviously don't want to get together physically, but teleconference. And I know that Gail's in Juneau, and I know Juneau Community Council provides the opportunity to call in under normal circumstances. So I don't really think COVID related has anything to do with their need or to get back together. But you know, I'm happy to have a conversation with her. Teresa, you have anything to add to that question?
Well, just that teleworking is a major component of necessary expenditures that have been identified. And one of the things that we did was we got corporate accounts for Zoom, so that we, you know, if we weren't going to be able to meet in person, that we could do it over the internet. And also, it took some time, but we also purchased webcams for everybody, because not all of our computers have them. And so those were ordered. Also, there was kind of a nationwide shortage on those, so it took 2 months to get them. But and then also providing laptops to our employees so they could work from home. So I don't know off the top of my head what the cost of that Zoom account was, but it was very minimal. And we did get the corporate account so that we could identify our name in the addresses and have a bunch of extra features, including how many participants you could have join. And so I would look into that. But I think the cost was pretty reasonable.
Excellent. Next question is from Cindy Mills. Can this be used, the funds, for a batterers program training and certification for POW? With COVID, there is an increase of domestic violence.
Anybody want to tackle that one?
I would think so. I know that one of the conditions on the money that we got from BIA was that we had to use it on existing programs. And one of those programs that we operate is ICWA. And so, you know, that seems like it would be a function of our Family Services Department. And also realizing that this pandemic has put children and families into crisis at a higher level than before.
I think we got time for another one here. This one's from Tasha Hotch. Can the money be used for supply chain issues to our communities that have experienced a cut in the ferry service?
I think right now the ferry service has been back online, so I don't know what those issues might be. I know this winter when we had no ferry service, we, among other groups, did food drives and worked with airlines and others to get food delivered to our communities. So I'm not sure what those needs are now, and maybe I don't know, Will, or if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
You know, I appreciate that, President Peterson, and yeah, you're right. I think this last winter there was a lot of organizations from across Southeast that rose up to meet the needs that were going on in some of the villages that were experiencing some of those supply chain issues. We know that between Juneau and here, and even Petersburg and Kaken and Goon, there was tenders that some of the large fish companies were donating. There was some contributions from the local flight companies that would fly some of the supplies, and Tlingit Haida did a big donation to these communities and put up a lot of food and other supplies that were necessary at that time. I'm pretty confident if we see another supply chain issue going on again, I think that there's communities that are surrounding that will step up and meet those needs, even aside from the request of our COVID. But you're right. I think right now with some of the tenders that are running back and forth, with some of the boats, ferries that are going back and forth between some of the hub communities and our smaller villages and communities, I think that that chain is working fairly well right now.
I also think that this is where our Tribal Emergency Operations Center is going to really become effective, is, you know, because we had this problem before COVID. And so we were able to respond to that. But, you know, now we have a dedicated team for that. So it's going to be an emergency operations center for all emergency items, not just, you know, beyond this pandemic.
I think that's a really great point, Teresa. One of the things I'm excited about with the Tribal Emergency Operations Center is that it's going to be an ongoing department of the tribe, or a program of the tribe, and not just COVID related, but all emergencies. And I think, you know, the food shortage, or I guess food shortage isn't the right word, but access to food was really the issue, and I think that's something that they'll tackle. Also, one of the efforts that we've been long time planning is greenhouses for local food security, and you know, we want to work as a region to help our tribes get greenhouses going. I think you know, local food security is also an ongoing issue and problem. So I do recognize, though, that we are out of time, and so we will, to the questions that we did not get to, we will make sure that we get those answered online. And so I just want to thank everybody and for tuning in, for your really great questions. Feel free to keep asking them beyond this event, and we will answer them. Today's door prize winners were Heather Meebon won a Hydro Flask, and Lucy Cake won a David Boxley Formline t-shirt. If you ladies submit your information through a message on this to Tlingit Haida. We'll get these mailed out to you. Again, I want to just thank all of our guests for joining us and to help our folks learn about our what we're doing and what we're doing to help. And just Ganesh Hawa to everybody for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this. We hope it was informative. Our intent is not to dodge hard questions. We want to be present and transparent. And so we hope we accomplish that today. Please feel free to keep those questions coming again, and join us next week for our lunchtime chat on July 30th to learn about our tribal child support unit and the programs and services they offer. Thank you and be well.